Tonight, more memorials as calls for change get louder.
What are you feeling right now?
Deep sadness, a cruel injustice.
People across the GTA continue to mourn and honor the 215 children whose bodies were discovered at the site of a former residential school in BC. Plus,
every hour that the lockdowns continue, more businesses make the decision to end their operations for good.
the province's stay-at-home order is ending, but for small businesses looking to reopen, the wait continues. And
to see this flag tells me that, we're heading towards a better future.
for the first time, some Catholic schools across Ontario, including in Toronto, are raising the rainbow flag to mark Pride Month. Good evening, I'm Kelda Yoon. Memorials are continuing to crop up across the GTA to honor the 215 children whose bodies were found buried at the site of a former BC residential school. Calls for searches at other sites are also growing louder. Our Jessica Ng is live outside Ryerson University tonight by the statue of Egerton Ryerson, which has been defaced and turned into a memorial for the children. Jessica, what have people written on it?
Dig them up, return them home, show the world how many of us you have murdered. Those words are meant to honor the 215 children that were found dead at what used to be the Kamloops Indian Residential School. It's not the first time the Egerton Ryerson statue has been vandalized. Ryerson is considered a key designer of Canada's residential school system, and now at his pedestal, a makeshift memorial for the lives lost. Kim Randall brought her daughter to a memorial at Ryerson, adding a pair of shoes to this growing collection.
I feel a lot of responsibility to raise my daughter and my son to know about this very, very dark chapter in Canada's history.
The children's shoes represent 215 children that were found. The adult shoes represent the walk that was cut so tragically.
The National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation estimates over 4,000 children died at residential schools, but that's based on death records. The 215 bodies found by radar at the site of a former residential school in Kamloops are said to be undocumented. Catherine Gandy says her aunt and grandparents went there. She visited the site 2 years ago and says she felt the children's spirits there.
Understanding my connection and how that institute implicitly impacted my family, the community, the nation, and my people as a whole.
Gandy helped organize Sunday's vigil at City Hall and says she's still processing the discovery.
And it was shock, grief, and sadness.
At 2:15 this afternoon, the TTC halted all buses, streetcars, and subway service to observe 2 minutes of silence in honor of the children found.
It's very deeply saddening for what the situation was.
Being able to sort of show that we made mistakes and we're trying our best to apologize.
At some schools across the province today, including in Toronto, the rainbow pride flag was raised to mark Pride Month. But in the midst of celebration, the flag's also lowered to half-mast in honor of the 215 children. At City Hall, the same thing. Gandy says it's not enough.
There needs to be additional investigations of all residential school areas in the perimeters and beyond to find more unmarked burial sites. There needs to be an awareness amongst Canadians and allies that the residential school is continuing.
Saying there are currently more Indigenous children in the foster system than at the peak of residential schools. And vandalism of the Ryerson statue isn't the only mark of anger or change here. The School of Journalism announced it's going to be changing the names of 2 of its publications, both of which have Ryerson in the title. The university says a task force is currently reviewing the use of his name throughout the university with consideration of the concepts of reconciliation and commemoration. I'll send it back to you in studio now.
Thanks, Jessica. That's our Jessica Ng reporting live for us tonight. Ontario reported just 699 new cases of COVID-19 today. Now, that is the lowest number since October 18th. Meanwhile, Toronto says more than 70% of adults in the city now have at least one dose of the vaccine. Now, all this comes after weeks of a stay-at-home order. Now, that order is set to expire tomorrow. But as our Chris Glover reports, for shuttered businesses, not much is going to change.
As the stay-at-home order officially lifts tomorrow in Ontario, no actual business or service currently shuttered will be allowed back.
Every hour that the lockdowns continue, more businesses make the decision to end their operations for good. They just can't hang on any longer.
Step one of the province's new reopening strategy, resuming outdoor things like patios, is still 2 weeks away, and personal care services are scheduled for the beginning of July.
For goodness sakes, the current Ontario plan reopens haircuts around the same time that the Alberta economy is completely open. This doesn't make sense.
York's medical officer worries keeping things closed is creating a new problem.
We are also observing underground economy taking shape. We're getting personal service settings in residential settings.
Some outdoor activities like rec camping were set to be allowed this week, but this past weekend, the government announced a further 2-week ban. All this is despite a steep decline in new infections. After peaking at more than 4,800 on April 16th, today seeing fewer than 700 new cases, a level not seen since last October. Vaccinations are way up too. Province-wide now closing in on 70% of adults having received at least a first dose, a vaccination threshold well higher than the province's stated target of 60% to resume things like patios.
However, there are also public health indicators that also need to be taken into consideration.
In Peel, we have a fairly unique situation in that our hospitals are still seeing significant capacity challenges.
Peel's medical officer also says the new variant first identified in India is multiplying quickly. But while emerging data is showing one dose of a COVID vaccine is less effective against it, this Mississauga infectious disease expert says it's still incredibly effective.
Things are fundamentally different. Yes, there are the variants, but what we do know is that the vaccines do work against them.
So he's adding his voice to the business and medical pile-on.
Our plan in Ontario, especially if you look at other provinces, is much too slow.
Calling for Ontario to pick up its reopening pace. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
We can know by tomorrow night whether students in Ontario will be heading back to their classrooms. Parents and students are eager to know what the remainder of the school year will look like. At Queen's Park today, the opposition pressed the government on why it's taking so long to make a decision. Our Lorenda Redikob has more.
Schools, we close them to protect families.
The education minister wasn't answering questions from the media today, and the premier was not at question period. So the deputy premier and minister of health was asked what's happening with schools.
Need to make the right decision, and that's why this is something that the premier is still consulting with others on this.
As for when that news could come,
we will have an answer for them very soon.
What is very soon?
Very shortly.
She says the premier is still reviewing responses to his open letter last week to health experts and education stakeholders.
Everybody is desperate to get back into the classroom. Why? Because their kids are suffering. They're suffering from mental health challenges. They're suffering from loneliness.
Opposition parties are calling for action.
Almost 2 weeks since we announced that Ontario would reopen, and there's still no plan. 2 weeks.
It's a failure of leadership on the part of the government that the premier brought forward a reopening plan that was silent on schools. And here we are 2 weeks later.
Parents are also looking for answers.
The waiting is definitely hard. Our kids ask about it.
This mom of 2 elementary school students feels schools can reopen safely, at least for younger kids.
I also think that now with the weather being so good, they could be outside a lot.
Another mom says distance learning has been hard on her kids and teachers, but she says the planning is already done for June.
Now to have to suddenly turn on a dime, throw that all out the window and readapt one more time for, 2 or 3 weeks, that seems bananas to me.
The Toronto District School Board says it could have schools ready within a few days if needed. Cabinet meets tomorrow. That's who makes the final decision on whether schools will reopen in June. Lorenda Redikob, CBC News, Toronto.
Let's go to Colette Kennedy now for a first look at the forecast. And Colette, overcast, but a pretty comfortable day. Things will be heating up, though.
Thanks, Kelda. You know, I thought we'd start by taking a look at kind of our temperature trend and where we're going over the next week or so. The next couple of days, things are going to be comfortable, and then we're going to start to see some real changes coming our way. So I'm starting off with tomorrow kind of afternoon. Just want you to look at the colors, the contours here. Yellows, oranges, mild. We're talking low to mid 20s. But then watch what happens Thursday towards the west of us. See this heat building? We're getting into the brighter oranges and reds. As we get towards Friday, it's building still, but still to the west of the southern Ontario and the lower Great Lakes. But that all starts to change. Saturday, it kind of takes over, still there into eastern sections of the prairies, but overtaking Ontario into Quebec and continues into Sunday. And guess what? It will be sticking around for a while. So what do we need to go with the heat and the dry conditions? Some rain showers. Hey, a slight chance getting into this as we go towards tomorrow. That increases as we get later Wednesday into Thursday. So for the GTA, most of Toronto is dry, that region, until we can get you later in the day. And then we'll see enhanced chances. Southwestern Ontario, you're going to see this moving in a little earlier. 14 overnight tonight, tomorrow afternoon, 25 degrees. Maybe a few stray showers showing up early. That's about it.
Thanks, Colette. As we mentioned, Pride Month kicks off today, and the Pride flag is being raised at hundreds of Catholic schools across Ontario, as some are welcoming the rainbow as a symbol of inclusion for LGBTQ students, but others say it doesn't belong there. Ellen Morrow has that story.
What does it mean to you, seeing the flag here?
You know, to me, it means hope for the future.
Hope grade 11 student Marcos Fonseca did not always have.
Thought about giving up, you know, taking my own life.
Fonseca is bisexual, has struggled with reconciling his sexual identity with his Catholic faith.
To see this flag tells me that, you know, we're heading towards a better future. You know, we can love who we want and we can be happy for who we are.
This Pride Month, several Catholic school boards across Ontario are flying the Pride flag for the first time.
How do you feel seeing it right there?
Oh, I think it's amazing.
Terry Finucane never thought it would happen. Finucane, who is gay, taught at Catholic schools for decades, hiding his sexual identity.
For so long, LGBTQ students and staff as well have been completely left out of the conversation. Just people pretended that they didn't exist.
But there's anger, too. This protest today at the Toronto Catholic School Board. Some parents and church leaders say flying the flag goes a step too far.
For them to say, well, I want to live a life according to what the pride, the gay pride flag and movement promotes, then says, well, I'm sorry, but that's not in line with our Catholic teaching.
In Halton, where the board voted against flying the flag, some parents want to see it at their kids' schools.
We as parents, we as allies, that we see you, that we care about you.
Fonseca says raising the pride flag does not diminish the school's Catholicism, it exemplifies it.
Being Catholic isn't about condemning others. It isn't about judging others. We need to love and accept each other, no matter who we are, no matter our differences, no matter what we do.
Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, many disappointed and frustrated Leafs fans still processing the team's elimination last night. The season just wasn't supposed to end this way. With a first-place finish in their division heading into the playoffs, it looked like this really was the year the team would finally move past the first round. So what happened? Dale Manukduk takes a look.
It's going to be deja blue again for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the Montreal Canadiens are headed to Winnipeg for the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs.
The horn sounded and the clock hit zeros. Just like that, the Leafs were out of the playoffs again.
Not surprised.
What's your reaction to last night's loss?
Oh, super sad, super sad. I actually thought they were going to come back and win, because they'll do that, just break your heart like that at the last minute.
It's getting harder and harder to stay a Leafs fan. My heart's been broken so many times, I don't know what to do anymore. The players were feeling it too.
It's just tough. Like, I just think of how hard our team battled, and for it to end on a...
Leafs Nation didn't see the fight
For them, they saw the same old, same old.
I honestly knew it was coming. They didn't play well for the last couple of games. They didn't show up with heart.
The way they play, nothing to see. This is 1 year, 2 years, 20 years, 40 years, the same next year, next year, next year.
While Leafs fans reminisce on past playoff failures, the players don't see it that way.
I don't think they were really a factor. I think that this is a different group. It's been a very different year, different playoff format.
The big difference this year, the Leafs were expected to win.
The Leafs were a heavy favorite. They were in first place in the regular season since early February. They really steamrolled their opponents. So they gave no indication that really anyone could touch them in the first couple of rounds of this playoffs.
Looking ahead to next season, do you see any major changes happening, or do you think they'll just run it back?
It really comes down to Nylander or Marner, and Nylander had one of the greatest playoff series he's had. I don't think you could put any of the blame on him. I think everyone's pointing at Mitch Marner.
Leafs general manager Kyle Dubas will speak to the media tomorrow. Dale Manukta, CBC News, Toronto.
During the pandemic, hundreds of thousands of road tests have been canceled in Ontario, leaving hopeful drivers stranded. I'm Angelina King. I'll introduce you to people who are desperate to get their license and tell you how long that wait might be. That's coming up.
Welcome back. Thousands of hopeful drivers in the GTA have been sitting idle since road test centers closed during the pandemic. People can get their G1 licenses, but not their G2s. Students, newcomers, and parents say not having their full license is not only an inconvenience, it's affecting their families and jobs. Angelina King reports.
Even though Vishwa Patne has her driver's license in Dubai, cycling is her main source of transportation here.
I feel super helpless because I know I can drive a car really well.
Patne still has to pass a road test in Ontario to get her G2 license. Hers has been cancelled and rescheduled several times. Without her G2, she's had to turn down work.
I felt pretty hopeless because I was like, oh, I'm getting a job offer, which is pretty good. It pays me well, but I'm not able to take it up.
Ontario's Transportation Ministry says nearly 400,000 road tests have been cancelled during the pandemic, the majority in the GTA. At the same time, driving instructors could hardly operate.
Yes, I can do parallel parking. When you are approaching the vehicle,
Azar Malik has been creating instructional videos on social media since he can't teach in person. Malik says in a regular year, upwards of 800 students from his driving school would get their license. But during the pandemic, that was cut down to about 80. He's frustrated driving exams will start again during the province's first step of reopening, but driving instruction cannot.
Really doesn't make sense, because driving tests, obviously, the examiner sits in the passenger seat like an instructor as well, right? So I don't know what's the difference between instruction and examination.
Megan D is the only person in her family with any sort of license. She wants her G2 so she can drive her mom to work, who commutes for more than an hour. Plus, she wants to get flexible and pandemic-safe work as a courier to pay for nursing school.
It's just impending doom, you know. Oh gosh, I'm so worried. Like, I've been jobless since February.
Patne and D have road tests booked in July and August, but Malik says other students aren't as lucky. They're up against a testing backlog he's afraid won't be cleared until next year.
The unfortunate part is there's so many people out there who are disobeying the law now because they want to drive. They're driving alone with their G1s.
Back in January, the province said it'll be adding 84 new road test examiners to help address that backlog. So far, just 35 have been hired. Angelina King, CBC News, Toronto.
A couple of clouds this evening, becoming clear overnight. Currently a nice 18 degrees in downtown Toronto. Let's go back to Colette now with a look at your extended forecast. And Colette, another comfortable day ahead, but then a possible heat wave as we get further into the week.
Thanks, Kelda. Well, let's go ahead and show you what's going to be going on, because we're going to see a heat wave coming our way as we get to the weekend. But there's a few days to go until then. And also, by the way, today, June 1st, the beginning of hurricane season officially, although Around May 22nd, we already had our first named storm, and that was Anna. All right, a pleasant day ahead for Wednesday. Southwestern Ontario, you may start to see some of these showers moving in, but around the Golden Horseshoe, they won't come until we get towards tomorrow evening and into Thursday. Hopeful for this. Why? Because we need some of this rain. It doesn't look like much. 5 to 10 millimeters in general. Could see locally a little heavier amounts, though, towards the north shore of Lake Erie. That heat wave, though, that moves in Saturday, Sunday, and lingers well into next week. So daytime highs today, we had mid-20s, and we'll see tomorrow some increasing cloudiness as the day wears on over towards the north shore of Lake Ontario. Before that, a few scattered showers there back into southwestern Ontario. As we get into Wednesday night into Thursday, see some steadier rain in pockets in those areas, and we'll kind of pick up whatever we can around the Golden Horseshoe and through even towards eastern Ontario, because by the time we get into Thursday afternoon, this is going to be moving away again and setting us up for what's to come with this next kind of heat wave here. So tonight, your temperatures 12, 13 degrees for lows, with the exception of London, where you'll be at 10 tonight. Tomorrow, the temperature's down just a little bit because of this system. You are going to see increasing cloudiness through this region and those winds turning towards the south, about 15 to 20 kilometers an hour. Tonight for Toronto, 14 degrees. Markham, you'll be at 12. And then tomorrow we go back towards those mid-20s. A few stray showers, kind of outliers that may come in a bit earlier. Otherwise, any wet conditions expected Wednesday overnight to Thursday. Clearing out, like I said, kind of second half of the day. We'll be seeing improvement on Thursday, but enough to keep the temperature a little cooler. By the time we get into the weekend, this is what I want you to see. The temperature second half of the weekend, low 30s. But look at the feels like. The humidex values into next week, they'll be approaching 40, Kelda.
All right, thanks, Colette.
This weather update is brought to you by Train. For a limited time, take advantage of 36 equal payments and 0% financing. It's hard to stop a train.
Finally tonight, June is National Indigenous History Month, and an Indigenous artist has recreated the TTC subway and bus route maps to include traditional landmarks and imagery. Posters are up at transit stations, and 5 art-wrapped streetcars are hitting the roads tonight. The campaign highlights different Indigenous historical sites in the north, south, east, and west end of the city near existing TTC routes and stations. Each poster features historical facts about the site to educate Torontonians about its significance.
I just love that we are showcasing these, this really interesting artwork on our platform, which is huge. And that Torontonians can see it and hopefully talk about it and learn more, right? That's, I think, really one of our big goals around this too, is to create awareness and to help create conversation.
Indigenous artist Phil Cote is behind the designs. The campaign will run through the month of June. And that's our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you back here